So welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kathy Tykolis. I'm the Richmond Art Gallery's Education Public Programs Coordinator, and welcome to the August 2021 session of the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon Series. Today, I'll be your host, along with our guests from Mobile Art School. We have Blaine Campbell, Hussein Halak, and Mohammed Samani with us today. I'm coming to you today from the Richmond Art Gallery, which is located on the traditional territories of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples. This is the language that is spoken by the nations who made their home along the delta of the Fraser River, and that includes the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And the Richmond Art Gallery was actually very fortunate. We had a local elder, Cecilia Point, record a video just for us to share some of the history of the immediate area of Richmond and to welcome all visitors to our space. So I do encourage you to view this video as an introduction to Musqueam and maybe start to dig a little bit deeper into some of the historical context of this area. So we have included the link to that video in the chat. And I want to thank all of you out there who are joining us from your homes and zooming into the Richmond Art Gallery. For those of you who are new to the program, the Artist Salon Series is a monthly program that runs on the last Saturday of each month from February to November. It is a mix of professional development tips and inspiration for visual artists to keep on making your art. The program also exists as a Facebook group. It provides resources for artists in the Lower Mainland mainly, with posts about artist calls, professional development opportunities, local arts events, as well as just a way to connect with each other and build up our community. So you can find out more about the Facebook group on the Richmond Art Gallery's website. I'd like to introduce our guest today. If you have participated in past artist salons or attended some of our art history sessions in the past, you may recognize the name Mobile Art School because they have worked with us in the past, offering illustrated talks on various art history topics. So since 2020, Mobile Art School has kind of moved their focus slightly to development of online art tools, namely their collective art making platform called ARP. So we have Blaine, Hussein, and Mohammed here with us today to talk about the development of this platform, how it came to be, how it can be used by artists, as well as just to give us some basics of NFTs and blockchain and how this can be utilized by artists and those working in arts organizations. So whether this technology is completely new to you or you're an old pro, please feel free to throw your questions in the chat and we will try to get to them all at the end of the session. I'll just give a brief intro to each one of our presenters today so you know who they are. And then after that, I will disappear into the background and let them take over. So first up, we have Blaine Campbell. Blaine Campbell is an Alberta-based artist working in photography, video, and installation. He recently presented a large-scale temporary public artwork as part of the Works Festival in Edmonton and has previously completed residencies at the Banff Center and the Triumph Nuclear and Particle Physics Laboratory at UBC. He has a background in applied mathematics and computer science, working for a time in Silicon Valley for a .com and subsequently on safety analysis systems for nuclear power plants. Welcome, Blaine. Next, we have Hussein Halak, who is founder and CEO of Next Decentrum, a blockchain company building Momentable, an NFT e-commerce platform focused on helping museums, art collectors, and cultural institutions create, manage, and promote NFT-based digital projects and products and collections on the Flow blockchain. In 2006, he launched Creative Arab, the world's first and largest marketplace for Middle Eastern art, focused on connecting artists across the Arab world with a global audience. He then launched The Content People in 2010, an award-winning content marketing agency with clients that included Virgin Mobile, Pfizer, and Starbucks. Prior to Next Decentrum, Hussein joined Launch as general manager. Launch is one of North America's top tech hubs and startup incubators with over 6,500 plus founders and 500 plus startups, raising over $1 billion. Mohammed Samani is a Vancouver-based visual artist entrepreneur, the creator of ARP, which is a collaborative art-making platform, and co-founder of Mobile Art School. Samani was also co-founder and CEO of Beam, a technology startup focused on home and office smart technology. Zamani is also a specialist focused on data systems integrations and user-focused visualization software, and trained in Lean and Six Sigma process improvement methodologies. So welcome, all three of you. I look forward to hearing about blockchain and about ARP today. As someone who doesn't know a lot about this, I'm sure I'll be learning a lot today. So I will just let you take it away.
Okay. I guess I'll start. Thanks very much. So we're going to, Hussein's going to kind of drive some slides, and then we'll each take turns in speaking. And I'll start out by giving a bit of a background on the technology in the blockchain, and just as a bit of a background of what we're talking about, and then I'll hand off to Hussein, who's going to talk about NFTs in particular, and then Mohammed's going to talk about the ARP app and where that's potentially going, and then we'll jump to question and answer. So I'll just give you a little bit of background of kind of where this talk is coming from and why we're engaged in it. Mobile Art School has been developing ARP, and we pursued, I'm not part of Mobile Art School itself. I was actually one of the artists kind of testing on it, but I was invited to help approach Canada Council and seek a funding opportunity to do research around technology and art. So we have a initial digital strategy fund grant through Canada Council to look at how some of these aspects of technology will potentially influence the art world. And we're looking at using the ARP application in particular as a testing ground to sort of play with these ideas. So one aspect we were considering is artificial intelligence. Another one is blockchain. And so today we thought we'd talk about blockchain in particular. So I'll give a little bit of background about blockchain and NFT, and then we'll kind of jump into things. So, and I'm not going to claim any kind of real expertise in this. Blockchain itself is, in terms of technology, it's still pretty new, and particularly within the art context. It's really exploded in like really the last few months. So to be honest, I'm sort of learning this stuff as we go as well. So I'm not going to claim expertise on this, and Hussein can maybe jump in if I'm making any glaring mistakes in what I'm saying. So just so everybody's on the same page, I thought I'd talk about just a little background on what this thing is. So the main idea is blockchain itself is a technology for keeping track of information in a distributed way. So it's really come out, particularly on the financial side, because traditionally, particularly within banking, transactions have to be recorded in some standardized way and in an agreed upon way so that money is actually flows properly and there's a record of it. So there's a ledger system within banking, and because it's such a big thing, there's many layers of that process between you and what actually happens kind of in the backbone of information in the wider world. So blockchain came along as this idea of recording that sort of information in a new decentralized way that skips all of those middle layers and creates, I want to say, almost a democratized public version of recording those transactions and recording them in a way that's agreed upon and immutable. So once it's recorded, everybody can see what happened. It's publicly visible. The people involved in that transaction may be anonymized, but the transaction itself is a kind of in a public record of a sort, and that's facilitated by this blockchain technology. So the idea is you kind of aggregate a bunch of transactions or information or agreements. At some point, those get recorded technically into a block, like literally a block of information, and that gets recorded upon the chain, hence the name blockchain. And once that's recorded, it's there, everybody can see it. And then the next set of transactions kind of are in process until you hit a time, and then that goes into a block and that goes on the chain. So the history is accessible to everybody in this chain of blocks, and it's always there and always visible. And it's distributed, so there's no centralized authority who's doing this. It's all the people who are supporting the blockchain are participating in generating that chain, in a sense. And there's a lot of technicality to it, but fundamentally, that record is distributed across many points, and all those points sort of agree upon that piece of information before it gets recorded, and then everybody shares that information ongoing. So you don't have to subscribe to some other centralized authority to do that for you. It's this distributed process that's shared. So that's where a lot of the enthusiasm around the idea of blockchain has come in, because you skip these centralized authorities and you have a sort of a democratized record keeping system. That there's a lot of potential for that. So the potentials for it are literally being kind of discovered as we go, amongst lots of different sectors. Our particular interest, of course, is in art. So there's a potential for, if you create an artwork, you record some information about that artwork, and that establishes the provenance of that artwork within a public record. And there's no question later on of like, well, who made it, when did they make it, how did it get sold, and who then sold it after or purchased it after that. All those steps are kind of recorded in a public record, and it's very easy to establish ownership and provenance and valuation as it went along. All that sort of stuff is of particular interest within art. And I decided to throw in a couple other bits of information around this, because as somebody has really come out of the tech world, tech stuff tends to have its own sort of language around all things. So you'll hear a lot of terms like proof of stake, proof of work, minting, mining. Trying to get around all those terms can be a little bit confusing. So I just thought I'd give just a little background on this, particularly the proof thing, because that I think is of particular concern within the art world, and that particularly around the proof of work concept. So the main thing with this distributed record is, because it's distributed, you don't want any one entity being able to sort of take over that record and make their own version of it. Because particularly from a financial standpoint, if somebody kind of takes control of the chain and writes their own version of the blocks, then they can start gaming the system to their financial advantage. So these blockchains have these proofing mechanisms to more or less guarantee that that record is agreed upon by a widely distributed group, and nobody can take too much control of it. So with Bitcoin, that process is called proof of work, and a number of chains are using proof of work. And that's where a lot of people are a bit concerned, because the proof of work means that you have to prove that you have done what you're doing, and to make it too expensive for any one entity to take control. When you're creating the Bitcoin or the related crypto record, there's this, you have to kind of chunk through these really complex computing problems, which translates into using a lot of electricity, which translates into environmental impact. So that's where there's been particular concern, and that concern has been raised even more so within the art world, I think. A number of these chains are in development, and they're using different systems now. So you may have heard of proof of stake. That's a different way of doing it with less electricity involved. There's a new one that was just released called Solana that's using something called proof of time or time arrow. So it's a really evolving platform for things. So it does get really complicated to try and track all this stuff, but there are things to be aware of. So from there, we'll jump into NFT. So NFT is something that's built on top of blockchain. So I just put this point in that NFT is not necessarily equal to blockchain. It's the idea of an NFT is a non-fungible token. So you can have non-fungible, like an artwork in the real world is technically a non-fungible token. It's a unique item, or there's some degree of uniqueness to it, like an edition number or some aspect of it that is giving it that sort of special status. And it's not one-for-one transferable into another thing. So fiat currency, so like money, is considered fungible. So $1 is equal to $1. And back when people were using paper currency, paper money has a serial number on it, and each one's unique. So technically, they're unique items, but they're one-for-one transferable to each other. Whereas when we're talking about something that's a non-fungible thing, it's not one-for-one transferable. So hence that's the term. And that process in a digital realm is being really facilitated by blockchain. So that's where it sort of exploded really quickly, is this idea that you can create digital things, digital art, whether it be music or video or image, and that thing can live in a sense on a blockchain as a record. And so this technology really facilitates that process, especially as more and more art is being generated within a digital realm. It's a mechanism of establishing that uniqueness in a purely digital way, which it in some ways is technically more complicated, but also easier to establish and maintain compared to, say, the old gallery system, where, as a visual artist myself and making photo prints, like I'll sign the back and put an edition number on it. That establishes the provenance, the uniqueness of that print. But there's a trust mechanism there that I'm not going to go off and make way more prints sometime in the future. So in this context, we're recording that information in a public ledger, and then that's sort of guaranteed in that sense. So the one other little thing I'll throw out in that is, I think there's a question within art and the art world of like, where, if I'm actually going to put my art on a blockchain, where does it live in a sense? And that gets a little more complicated, because the blockchains are not really designed to hold big pieces of data in itself. So like if I'm making a photograph, I might have a 2 GB image file that it turned into a print. That's not something that's going to live on a blockchain itself particularly well, because it's not really designed to hold large blocks of data. So in fact, small version of the image and information about me, that will be recorded in the blockchain, and then the image itself is going to live somewhere else. So it's more like the blockchain and the NFTs is going to point to that content. Okay, so those were the kind of the background things I wanted to cover, just to give context to this. And then I'll hand it over to Hussein. He can talk about NFTs in particular and where they're going. So.
Cool. So thank you for that, Blaine. Appreciate the intro. So I'm gonna try to answer, if my cat just goes away a little bit from, no, don't push the camera. So I'm gonna try to kind of touch on why NFTs, why should you care? You've been hearing those three-letter words, or 3 letters in particular, everywhere. And I've seen from talking to a lot of artists, anywhere from "this is exciting, I want to be part of it," how to "I don't care, I do this kind of art, this is kind of, this is a gimmick, I don't want to." So I invite you to, whatever you have perceptions about NFTs, to put them on the side a little bit, to open your mind a little bit, and just take what I tell you, and then at the end of it, just throw it away if you don't like it, and replace it with your existing ideas. But just for the sake of the next 15 minutes, just open your mind to what I'm going to share with you. Hopefully there's something there for you, and you will understand where I'm coming from, because I do believe that NFTs are not just they are technological innovation, but they fundamentally shift how we interact with each other, and they are part of the new world of blockchain that's going to dominate, whether you like it or not, whatever our opinions are. So let's go on a journey. So in order to talk about the future, I'm going to take you to the past, 50,000 years ago in the past. And I don't know if you know, but I think the oldest grave that we were able to unearth is around, there's a different kind of timings, but anywhere between 80,000 to 130,000 years ago. But 50,000 years ago, we started to have things and collect things as people. That is, to give you context, that's the end of the Stone Age, or around the Stone Age. And that is when people, you would open tombs and you would find people that have things with them, and in particular beads that you would find in graves. People would take them with them as things that they collected. Bottom line is, for tens of thousands of years, we collect. We collect for multiple reasons. In fact, actually, it's very hard to ask someone why they collect something. And if you see in the background, I have a painting of an artist. His name is Talal Mualla. He's a Syrian artist. And I can't tell you why this painting. He had an exhibit, I think, with almost 50 images and paintings of faces similar to this one. I was attending. He's a friend of mine, great artist, also a great historian of art. And I was going around and I stopped at this painting, and it just stopped me, and I had to have that painting. I can't explain to you why. I may say the colors, I like it or something, but that painting literally stopped me at my place, and I couldn't leave. I just fell in love with that painting, and I had to have it. I don't collect art in general. I didn't have a history of collecting art. Of course, I'm a lover of art, but this painting stopped me, and I had to have it. So what are some of the things that if you look around you, you would have, that you would acquire, that you've collected, and why? You may find reasoning, but most of the time we don't know. We collect because we're programmed to. For tens of thousands of years, we've been doing it. For some, it brings us joy, pleasure, fulfillment, memories. It has some sort of meaning to us. And it brings us together. We talk about the things we collect. I remember vividly that we had a surrealist painting at my house in Damascus. I grew up in Damascus, Syria, and it was by an Iraqi artist, a very, very famous artist from UK. I'm trying hard to remember his name. He was a friend of my parents. And that's why they kept the painting. Otherwise, in that part of the world, nobody would keep a surrealist painting on the wall, because it's quite weird with people with one eye. But every time anybody would come to our house, they would have tons of conversations around this painting. They would have, it would bring us together, and it will spark a lot of why you're hanging it to what does it mean. And that's always been the case as I grew up, 30 years that I grew up at that house. So we collect, I would argue, because it's in our DNA as people. We collect anywhere from art that varies in how expensive. We collect stamps. I collect the stamps when I was young. We collect cars, sneakers, not my cup of tea, but hey, if whatever makes you happy. We collect wine. We collect comics. We collect all kinds of things. And it's a massive, massive market between art, collectibles, and sports. It's almost $1 trillion market. So there is an economic impact of our habits as human beings. But in order to understand, so we collect, let's agree on that. In order to understand NFTs in particular, I want to bring you back to the start of the 1900s, 1911 in particular, when the theft of a particular painting made it the most valuable painting in the world. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. This is its empty space. This is the Mona Lisa. And the Mona Lisa, before being stolen, was just another painting. It didn't have anything particularly special about it. I mean, people may argue it's Da Vinci's greatest paintings or not, or whatever you think about it. People didn't really care that much about the Mona Lisa. It wasn't the crown jewel of the Louvre that it became after it was stolen. After it was stolen, and it was a kind of stolen, like somebody walked out, an Italian who thought that this is a painting needed to be in Italy, walked out of the museum with the painting, just simply. And for 2 years, that space became empty, and visitors came to see the empty space of the painting. And when the painting came back at 2 years after, it became more famous. And right now, it's the most famous painting in the world, arguably. It attracts over 10 million visitors a year. Now, that's fascinating. Why? Because the value of that painting arguably is not about its artistic value. It's about its fame. And you can understand that if you think of who are the most paid people in the world. Are those the people who add the most value to our world, like scientists, doctors, or are they the people who we know the most, the famous people, the Kardashians, the sports players? So the more fame something attracts, the more value it kind of commands from us. It's not just about the artistic value. And funny enough, I want to talk about, I want to bring Picasso to because I want to use one of his paintings as an example to illustrate what NFTs. But the funny thing is that Picasso was one of the suspects in the theft of the Mona Lisa. He was considered a person of interest. He was even, I think, interviewed by the police, but then let go. So that's kind of the connection between the Mona Lisa and Picasso. But aside from that, let's take one of his very expensive paintings called The Dream, and that's $155 million painting. Now, this is a painting, beautiful painting. I love Picasso. This is a $155 million painting. There's a problem here. What if you want to buy that painting as a collector? You would have, imagine moving that much money. If you want to move that much money, you would have to, of course, be extremely wealthy, and you have to go through different checks at the banks, and you have to, it's not like a matter of here's a check and here you go. There will be a lot of checks because it's an enormous amount of money. So there's a challenge in moving that. In addition to that, when you pay that much money for this painting, you want to make sure that this is the painting that you paid for. It's not a replica. It's not a kind of a forgery. So you need a certificate of authenticity that comes with that painting. The Picasso Institute issues a certificate of authenticity, says, yes, this is The Dream, the painting by Picasso. We verify that. It's almost the same when you want to buy a print of that painting. Usually that print, to have any value, needs to be a limited print. If you have an unlimited print, basically it's a poster, usually doesn't have value because everybody can own it. Maybe it's like a $2 or $5, or maybe it's framed, maybe $100. But if you want to buy a limited print, actually I checked out, it's in the thousands of dollars. And also you get a certificate that says, this is an original print and only 500 of these have been printed. And this is one, let's say, print number 171, for example. If the print is signed by the original artist, like many of the photographies are, then it even rises in value some more. So we do right now buy paintings and buy prints of painting, but there's a problem. There's a problem of the payment. In fact, if the payment exceeds $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and you want to pay online, the bank may flag it as a payment. So you have to go through all these hoops. And then there is the certificate of authenticity that you have to get from somewhere. And if I want to sell that painting, I want to sell that print, I have to, the person who's buying it wants to make sure that this certificate is not a forgery as well, not just the painting or the print, that the certificate itself. So then you have all these checks and all these challenges. So you have challenges of moving money, which is centralized with the banks, challenges of the certificate of authenticity, which is centralized with a certain institute. That's when the innovation of cryptocurrency and blockchain comes to play. And I'm not going to explain to you technology-wise, but I'm going to explain the impact of that. When cryptocurrency was introduced, which has a long history, payment became something easy, because now I can pay even $155 million. I can move it with a few clicks off of my computer and with zero checks, in the sense that nobody can stop it. I can send it to someone and I will pay not an enormous amount. I wouldn't pay even in the thousands of dollars. I will pay maybe $20 for this transaction. That is incredible, to be able to move amounts of money in lightning speed and without having to pay an enormous amount for transactions. That's a big deal. So that releases the payment aspect of art from the grip of institutions that exist right now, for good or bad. I'm not arguing it's good or bad, whatever you believe, but that's what the innovation gives us. Then the technology behind cryptocurrency, which is the blockchain technology, enables something else. Blockchain, as Blaine explained, it's a ledger that keeps all the transactions that happen on it. There are multiple blockchains, and a transaction is like the transaction between me and you exchanging this painting. So that certificate of authenticity can become a digital file. It doesn't have to be a print. It can be a digital file that is now registered on the internet. And that digital file can say, now the owner of this painting is no longer Hussein, the owner is Blaine. And I can go and kind of tell the world that I'm the owner, but people can go check on a blockchain because it's publicly available information on the blockchain where I registered, and they can say, no, Blaine owns the painting. And a bit of information here is people ask, well, what if the painting itself was forgery? Blockchain doesn't confirm the painting. Well, I say, even if I had the forgery itself, I don't have the certificate that says that I own the authentic. So even if I if I had the authentic one and I sold Blaine the forgery, so Blaine will have the forgery, but will have the certificate that authenticates it's real. And I would have the real one with no certificate. So I try to sell it to somebody else. Maybe somebody who's convinced and go checks it and say, yes, this is the real one, and try to keep it. But to the world, I have the forgery because I don't have proof that is the authentic one. Wrap your head around that. So the certificate of authenticity is clearly very, very important. And that's what gets exchanged because of the blockchain technology. And now I don't need the Picasso Institute to certify that. Once the transaction happens, automatically, because this is now code, it's no longer paper, the ownership transfers completely to Blaine, and to everyone in the world, he owns now the painting. Fast forward to this year or the year before, with the rise of NFTs. NFTs have been around for 4 years. What an NFT is, if we just switch back and forth, an NFT is that certificate of authenticity. But it's tokenized, so there's the certificate of authenticity existed on the blockchain before, but now it's tokenized and it's easily tradable and collectible. So now I can Blaine can list that NFT, which is a certificate of authenticity of the dream. He can list it on a marketplace, and anybody can buy it or bid on it, or they can exchange hands. And the thing here is that it can be a certificate of authenticity, that NFT can be connected to a real painting, or it can be connected to a digital painting. So what gives that thing value, and why do we collect it? Well, we go back to the same question we ask of the Mona Lisa. What gives it value? It really depends on what you think about it, and most likely it's about what others think about it. So things have value because other people think it has value. And same thing, the Mona Lisa. It was no different before the world put their eyes and gazed at the Mona Lisa or at the empty space and thought, hey, where the heck is it? And then it gained popularity and became one of the most valuable paintings on Earth. And the same thing happens with NFTs. NFTs is not about whether you own the digital file or not, or whether it's a digital file that everyone sees. In fact, the more people see it and the more people want to see it, the more value it has. So it flipped on the idea of just ownership of the actual object and the verification of ownership. So the deed that you own it and actual physical ownership, and it decoupled that. Now you can own something that you physically don't have control of. It's out there on the internet. Everybody wants it and everybody has it. And that's why it has value. The same thing with Mona Lisa. Everybody can have a copy of it. Everybody can have the digital image, and everybody can go to the Louvre to see it. But if somebody would tokenize it, if Louvre issues an NFT and says, you're now the owner, but it stays visible and everybody can see it, it's going to go for probably hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is why people are collecting these NFT digital artworks, where people scratch their head. Why do I want to own an art that I can hang? Why do I want to own a digital file that everyone has? It's because everybody wants it. Everybody knows it. It's because of its fame. It's because you want to own it. It's because of multiple things that mean something to you. And that's why a CryptoPunk, which is a digital characters, these digital characters, 10,000 digital characters, are worth combined almost $500 million right now, even though they were distributed for free 4 years ago. This cat is worth $1 million because a lot of people think it's rare and think it's an amazing cat. And I think it's cute, but not $1 million cute. This video, because it's made by Beeple, who created the famous NFT artwork, the 5,000 Days, and because he released it and people thought it has value, it had value, $6.6 million of value. Jack Dorsey's tweet, because it's the first tweet of the founder of Twitter, and people bid on it, so the perception of value created a value of $3 million. And if you don't believe it, just look up Chicken McNugget on eBay that people bought for $100,000. Just what can I say? People are weird. And that's why people will own a dunk, a video of a dunk that for them it has value. So this is what NFTs are for, and this is why you should pay attention, because suddenly, as an artist, as you build credibility and as you build your personality, think of yourself as just like musicians are. A musician would probably create a catalog of art of music and works, and one song that goes, let's say, what do you call it, goes platinum. Basically, a lot of people are now downloading, but at the time buying, and people suddenly, their whole catalog is worth so much more. That is not available right now for artists because it's not a digital file. There's no control. There's no copyright control. If you sold the painting when you first starting for $1,000, and now you're $100,000 artist, let's say you sell your painting for $100,000, that painting, the person that owns it will sell it for $100,000 or $50,000, and you'll make nothing out of it. NFTs can change that, because if you authenticate your art and your art is recorded as an NFT, the person that bought it right now for $1, even if you distribute your art for free, and then you build a personality and your art gains in value, you continue to earn royalties from your artwork, from every piece of your art that gets sold anytime in history, because it's now NFT is a programmable item that records the transactions and automatically sends you that royalty that you defined from the moment you created it. So I think it's something, if there is nothing else about NFTs that you care about, just the fact that you continue to monetize the value of your work, of your kind of combined work, that is alone enough. And maybe want to end on one thing is basically it helps you with payment. So it makes it easy for people to pay your art. I'm talking the whole world, rather than just going through a gallery or people have to visit your exhibition. And maybe you're an artist, you want people to visit, but just you produce, most artists, in addition to the gallery of the work, they produce an enormous amount of artwork. Not all of it they exhibit, not all of it that people accept to exhibit, but now you can make that available. So you can accept payment from anywhere in the world. You can give access to your art. Now your art can be online, and the more famous, a lot of people I know try to protect their art and put, watermarks, but the more famous your art is, the more access people have to it, the more value, and they can own it as NFTs. So it flips the script, and you now have the more publicity you get, and the more you let go of your art, the more you gain value. And then you authenticate who owns it, and you reduce the risk of theft. And so this is just some stats on the control of access, on the resources that are available. Obviously, NFTs are hard, but you need some resources, online resources, and the experience of NFTs still. So it's not, it is a great thing, but access is still limited. There still needs to be work on the NFTs. They're not easy to create, and the access to or how it's experienced is not that good. And if I want to leave you with one thing, is that famous story about Picasso, going back to Picasso again, one of my favorite artists, when he was on a bridge, and I don't know how real that story, and one woman came to him and asked him to do a sketch of hers, and he did, like, in 5 minutes he sketched her, and he gave her, and he asked her for 5,000 francs, French francs at the time, and she said 5,000 for 5 minutes. He said no, it took 20 years of work to do these 5 minutes. So just like that, the artwork that you're doing right now, it took all these years of work. So I would encourage you to investigate NFTs so that you can capitalize on the work that you're doing and the brand that you're building. And with that, I transfer back to Mo. Over to you.
Appreciate that, Hussein. Really fascinating stuff. And I wanted to talk a little bit about mobile art and basically how we're approaching this new technology. It's very much informed by what mobile art is. So mobile art was founded in 2018 by Fiona Chan, Sean Allward, Evan Lee, and myself. And on the slide there, the next slide, you see a picture of us at the bottom right-hand corner. But Sean, Evan, and I, we went to art school together some 20 years prior to that. And Fiona is a pharmacist who's now doing a PhD in epidemiology, but someone with a really strong creative talent and flair. And I think what mobile became and was informed by our personal life experiences. And by that, I mean that Evan and Sean brought their experiences as practicing artists in the city. Many of you will be aware of their work. And Fiona's experience as someone who didn't go to art school, but that had an urge for creative expression, and myself as well as someone who continued to make art since art school, but in my day job worked in a field really far removed from the art world, but where I would find common creative ground. So our core belief in mobile was that creative expression in any form is a fundamental human need, one that makes us feel better and has critical benefits to our quality of life. And that learning creative skills should be accessible to everybody because essentially we're all creative beings. So we were adherents to what Joseph Beuys once said, that everyone is an artist. So we wanted mobile to be a catalyst for people from all walks of life to find their creative expression through playing and through having fun. And we do this even today through the courses that we teach, the programs that we do, and the technology that we're building. It's all informed by this notion of play. So we started out by delivering art classes and lectures to retirement living homes around the Lower Mainland. That was our start. And we started a social investment fund for companies to invest in mobile in order for us to go out there and provide quality classes to those homes in our communities that really needed it the most. And not surprisingly, we found artists and teachers in our networks who were really passionate about working with seniors and really enjoyed that work. And our teachers would deliver content that they were passionate about. They talked about art that they grew up with and loved without really watering anything down. And the seniors, they loved it. So in early 2019, we opened up a physical space in Chinatown on Kiefer Street at the BC Artscape Studios and began delivering a huge range of classes, all of which were informed by a sense of playfulness, community, and experimentation. And you can see a flyer there for one particular month of all the different things that we would do. And in terms of the founders themselves, we were basically facilitators to connect interesting artists in our communities with an audience within their communities. And this was one of the most fun aspects of running the school. When we actually had the space in Chinatown, we'd meet a lot of artists who would come and talk to us. We'd have a coffee together. They'd tell us their class ideas, and if it sounded cool, we had no issues with giving that a shot. And hence the sheer variety of classes that you'd see at Mobile. And I would say our most popular event was our Friday night drink and draws, which you see some examples of there. And I have to give Kathy credit here. She gave us that idea of drink and draws. I know Richmond was doing it before Mobile, but we really ran with that idea. We'd basically have an open bar and do fun exercises led by local artists like Neil Wedman, Aaron Lucy, Sean Caremaker, where we do like all sorts of collaborative activities and where laughter really played a big part. So our philosophy was, first of all, accessibility. We wanted anybody to come in and be able to be creative and not have any kind of like hang-ups around making art. The second is like we wanted it to be playful and social. So our classes were often, you'd be focusing on doing something creative, but you'd be sitting next to somebody and collaborating with them a little bit. So that would usually start a conversation, and people would actually get to know each other. The third is that we were artist focused. So we were really interested in finding new ways for artists to make money, essentially, and have an impact in their community, and not just like, token payment, but really valuing what they're bringing to the table. I think this has always been a focus for mobile and will continue to do so, especially in our foray into technology. We're experimental as well. Like I said, the teachers would come and pitch different ideas. We try it, but our view on this experimentation is that we're just leaving ourselves open to moments of magic to happen. So mobile art was like a laboratory to me, where we just experiment with things and we just look for that moment of magic to happen. And we also wanted to be an alternative to traditional institutions to make art, to learn about art, and even to show art. Basically a school that has like, very little red tape in terms of getting things done. And so we wanted to be the art school experience that you never had. Like going to art school can be really a life decision. When I decided to go to art school, it was really a choice I was making about my life, that yes, I want to be an artist and this is going to be my life from now on. But I don't think it needs to be such a big black and white decision. I love the idea of people, doing different careers, but still having an interest in art and being able to go to art school through something like our school, which, brings us to what we're doing today, which is the development of ARP. And Saint, if you could flip the next slide. When we were doing our classes, one thing that kept happening, or like a recurring theme, was Exquisite Corpse. This game that was invented over 100 years ago by the Surrealists, where they would take a piece of paper, you draw something, you'd fold it up, and you draw something at the top. You'd leave a little hint for the next person to continue, and then that person would pass it on to somebody else. And kids love this game. We'd use it in a lot of different contexts within mobile. And in terms of the magic I talked about, the light bulb idea happened when we were doing one of our classes, and we were using the Exquisite Corpse context. And the question that I asked was like, well, wouldn't it be great if you could collaborate on a proverbial piece of paper with anybody anywhere across the world? So if I could do one piece and send it to a random person somewhere else, and they pick up from where I left off, and then they can send it to somebody else. That simple concept where you're making art together and you're connecting people and potentially making friends through that process was incredibly powerful. So we built an app called ARP to do exactly that, and it's available on the App Store right now. It's an iOS app, so it works on iPhones and iPads. It's great on the iPad. And I encourage everybody here, if they're interested in this, to download it. It's free. Hopefully, one day in the future, we'll have an Android version as well. But right now, it's basically an iOS app. Oh, I'll show you a little bit about how ARP works. So the traditional Exquisite Corpse process is shown on the left side there, where you have a piece of paper and you fold it into various pieces. And the advantage that the technology gave us is that, well, now we're not limited by the size of a page, even the direction that we're collaborating with and whom we're collaborating with. Essentially, we have the internet to be able to connect us. So what we've done in the app is that we've created all kinds of different configurations. So here's a 6-tile collaboration that you see where there's a square started at the start there and finishes. And if you move to the next slide, there's a couple more examples of the type of art and collaborations that you could do. It could be, a 12-tile collaboration. It could be really any size. And that's really the concept that we're playing with, is around like 360-degree kind of connections, and even collaborating in layers in the future. So, for us, this is just continuing the philosophy of mobile art. And here you see a whole bunch of, different collaborations, which just shows you the explosion of creativity that can happen when you have this kind of random connections and random images where you have limited knowledge of what the previous person did. But in that context, you can create some really beautiful works of art, which you see here, which I could see as paintings, as NFTs as well. And so this is a topic that really interests us from the mobile art perspective is, can you have a democratized tool like an app where anyone can come and join? So let's say you have a 14-year-old high school kid just like downloading ARP and is really talented at making art, finds a community or a set of collaborators that they work really well with and create some amazing art. Well, to me, that's a great way to utilize the concept of the NFT to give people a platform that bypasses the traditional institutional route. What we're really doing in this project, so Blaine mentioned this in the beginning, but we have some support from the Canada Council Digital Strategy Fund, and we're going to look into this concept of NFTs and AI using ARP as the experimental platform to test some of these concepts. And if you're familiar with blockchain technology and AI, you probably just kind of laugh me out of the room right now because those are huge areas to focus on. But I think what we're going to do is to start a conversation around these two topics, and then eventually to develop one of them in more detail. So Blaine, I don't know if you want to take it from here and maybe talk a little bit about what we're interested in.
Sure. So the two, as we were saying, the two avenues we've been considering through this Digital Strategy Fund grant is how we can potentially use blockchain technology in one aspect, and then the other one was to consider how artificial intelligence might feed into art creation, and then again using ARP as the platform for kind of testing these ideas out in a real world context. So from the blockchain standpoint, the idea of like, if you're going to create art within ARP or in another context for that matter, how can we facilitate getting art onto the blockchain to establish that provenance or that authenticity, as Hussein was saying, and then how could we potentially do that, especially in a collaborative context? Because so much, I think for the most part, most of the focus on, say, the NFT domain has been more so on the individual artists. And logistically, that's just sort of easier out of the box. But particularly within, say, the ARP context, it is collaborative from the beginning. So how do we facilitate keeping track of things within the blockchain world, but in a collaborative context? What does that mean? Not only technically, like how do we do it, but also what does it mean to have a collaborative record? So that's the one avenue, and then also, like, if we translate that into an NFT and then actually make that a sellable art object, what does it mean if it's collaboratively generated, and how do funds maybe get distributed? How do we potentially integrate a charitable aspect to it? Because like the potential is that can we use art as also as a support to the wider art system? How do we facilitate that? So those are the kind of the main avenues we've considered looking at for blockchain under this grant. And then the other aspect that we proposed Canada Council was to look at how do we potentially use artificial intelligence in these contexts. And one avenue of that might be, can we use AI just to facilitate finding collaborators? So if you generate a tile within ARP or a drawing, can we use something more than just randomness to pick your next collaborator? Maybe we can have an artificial intelligence aspect that finds you a collaborator that may be of interest to you because that other person draws in a similar style, or has produced drawings that you kind of like in some way that will feed well off of yours, or push it in the other direction and have an AI that will find somebody that's maybe the opposite of that and kind of inspire you more in some way. So that was one AI thought. And then another AI thought was, could we actually have artificial intelligence be a collaborator? So what does that mean if you are creating a drawing and the next tile is created entirely by artificial intelligence, by the computer, and then it feeds into the next tile, which maybe is another AI or maybe another real person? What does it mean to actually collaborate on a creative level with this artificial intelligence aspect? Because I mean, that is something that's of growing concern societally, but also what does that mean in art? So these are the things we've wanted to consider within this grant.
Yeah, I just would chime in there in terms of the AI component, Blaine, where, I'm really interested in how collaborating with AI can be a way for you to basically get better at what you do. So almost like a training tool where you can feed things, we can learn from the AI, which could be informed by other drawings in the app, or could be informed by a style of a particular artist. And, how can you engage with this and train this, and how can it help you be more creative every day? So I would maybe clarify that that's the kind of approach that we're taking with AI, is how can it help your creativity? And on the digital on-chain portfolio idea, I think for the artists out there, might find this interesting, is that we're thinking about, we all use all kinds of different apps these days, and much of our creative output sometimes makes its way out there in the internet. So you might post something on Instagram, you might use a different app that you post something else on, but this is all kind of your creative output. And the question we're asking is that, can there be like a substrate underneath all of that, where all of the things that you do on the internet, all that digital output collects and accrues to your digital portfolio on a blockchain? So can there be a transferable technology that's a digital on-chain portfolio that, throughout your career, things will just keep getting logged under your digital wallet? And so, your history as an artist on the internet has, you can see that continuity and that value that Hussein mentioned about, that 5-minute drawing is actually 20 years worth of work. The digital on-chain portfolio supports that model, is that it gives and empowers, I think, artists. So we're looking at blockchain technology, not just from a transactional monetary standpoint, though that would be amazing if that does happen, but also in terms of empowering, in terms of what the output that artists are doing.
So I'll add one other little bit to that, in that, just to clarify for the audience, that like, we're thinking about all this stuff, but we don't have a huge grant at this point. So part of the motivation with having this talk is that we'd like to really hear back from the wider arts community to see where artists' particular interests lie at this point, and what is their major concerns, and really look for feedback in terms of what are artists thinking about, and where do they want to kind of see things go? Because I mean, this initial grant that we have is not a huge one. Like, we're not going to build a completely functional artificial intelligence collaborative system and an NFT marketplace inside ARP and all this other stuff in one go. Like, we don't have a massive grant. We have something small just to kind of get things started. So we are looking for some sense of direction from the wider community in terms of what is a real concern, so we can kind of direct the practical efforts of this. But we do want to kind of keep the ongoing wider discussion to longer term, because I mean, these are things that are really going to impact the art world as a whole, across the board as we go forward. And so everybody kind of going to keep these things in mind in some way. And as I say, we would really like to hear more from everybody and kind of keep the dialogue going in that sense. So to that end, we do have a link, and we'd like to invite everybody to kind of follow that link and potentially sign on. We're going to hopefully have a newsletter, and we've been considering having a blog or something to that effect as well, just to further the discussion. But from there, I guess we can jump to question and answer.
Well, thank you for that. It was really informative, and it was really good to hear all three of your different perspectives as well, because it is such a big, huge topic. So it's a lot to cover. We have had one question so far, but I would, everybody out there who is watching us, if you could please send in your questions, just type them into the chat and I will ask them out loud for everybody. We have one so far, was just from Dorothy, of does ARP work on computers too? I'm thinking, I guess, desktop computers.
Yeah, unfortunately, right now it's an iOS app only, so it only works on mobile devices, not laptops or PCs. So, and specifically iPhones and iPads. We definitely want to expand on that in the future.
Great. So another question has just come in. Question about NFTs. In the case of fraud or dispute, how do things get verified, enforced, and resolved in real life? Are our legal system or other international organizations at the point of recognizing the blockchain record? And have there been any examples of this being challenged or enforced?
It's a very, very complex system right now, mainly because technology is way ahead of regulation. And the challenge with the blockchain technology is, let's say somebody does create an NFT of an artwork that you can't, that is yours. You can, even if in the rulings, let's say they can rule to your side. Let's say the courts find that they rule for you, and you're in the right, and the person should not have done that. Even if the person wants to, they cannot remove, you cannot remove a record off of the blockchain. What the best that can happen right now is the main marketplaces, they can actually remove the artwork from their featured artworks. That's the only thing they can do. You cannot stop something that is on the blockchain, which is the best way to prevent, basically, is to be the first. It's just like a domain. You cannot prevent somebody from reserving a domain about the names of your art or the names of your business or even your name. There might be some legal aspect, but it's a long process. The best way to protect yourself is to create your own NFTs. Create your artwork as an NFT, even if you don't want to sell it. Create it as an NFT, have it be done, and you post it and say, here are my NFTs, or tell anyone, no way, don't get my artwork from anywhere else, because people are doing that. And you most likely, if you're not in the space, you will not know. You will not know that somebody has minted NFTs of your art and is selling them and probably making money before you do that. So the answer is very complicated. Legally, yes, you can't stop anyone, obviously, in your jurisdiction of doing that. If they're if they're global, it's very hard. Technically, you cannot stop any NFT that has been minted and created on the blockchain. So the ideal protection is prevention. Create your own NFTs, just like you register your own domain. Be out there first, create your brand, be present, so that people do not abuse your lack of presence.
Great, thanks. Connected to that, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for such a timely and interesting topic. Question is on the valuation of artwork. What is the process for determining a work's monetary value? As blockchain is decentralized, does that mean the value of NFT art is set by the market instead of the artist?
Yeah, I'd love for
go
Maria
ahead,
to.
Yeah.
No, I'll let you answer, but I would say it's a great question, and that's exactly the types of questions that we want to ask in our project. So, yeah, Hussein, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the value of the artwork that is set for. So technically, you can set the value of the artwork that you want to sell. You can sell the artwork directly, or you can. One of the things you can do is you can auction the artwork. So I don't know if I lost you guys. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. I don't know why it froze. The Zoom froze on my side. But so you can set the sale price. You can also auction. When you auction, it depends on people kind of bidding for for the artwork. So that depends on the market demand. And you can offer an artwork at a certain price and find somebody to buy it, but maybe there's nobody to buy it from there as well. So it's a very, I would say it's a dynamic that is strange right now. It's usually you would in the art world, you would start by kind of referencing, or either some artists set and say, here's where I want to start. Sometimes the galleries kind of interfere and say, well, we know what our collectors want. I would say in the NFT world, test, play around. You can always change the price of the artwork that you're setting. So try with a few NFTs to start with and set the price and see what the market bears. And the beauty about it, if your artwork is in demand after, you still make money out of royalty. So if you set it, let's say, too low, if you think, and then somebody sells it for high, you still make money off of every transaction every exchange, you make a royalty. So you can set the royalty to anywhere between 5 to 20. Most likely people set it between 10 and 20. And you make, so even if you set it wrongly and people sell it, some people just release the artwork for free and say, I want to give away these set of artworks, and people start trading them and they make money off of them. So because they don't want to get into, the effort of marketing them. So it's a ploy of marketing to release it that way.
I just wanted to add to that too, that the starting price isn't like establishing a starting price in this domain isn't necessarily all that different from the way it was traditionally in, say, the gallery system, in that you as the artist establish sort of your starting initial, like your minimum price, your selling price. Like in a gallery context, you usually in context or in conversation with a gallerist, you would set that starting price, but determining evaluation is sort of a question of how the market will bear out and if people are willing to buy it. So it's not really that different. You have control of determining your initial valuation, and then just a question of how it goes after that. And as Hussein says, a very nice thing within this NFT context is that it's kind of built in that you get secondary income from sales, which in the traditional markets, in like in a traditional gallery system, that is only starting to kind of come to bear through the auction markets, and we don't have that legislation in Canada yet. So some European countries, you are guaranteed an income if your artwork is resold in the secondary market. We don't have that in Canada. So if you sell something, if I sell a photo print now and then that collector goes off and resells it later, I see nothing of that. Whereas it's baked into the NFT, which is a nice aspect in this regard.
True. So then Valerie's asking, how do you create your own NFTs?
I guess, guys, feel free to jump in. I'll take. I guess
this is yours for sure.
The easiest way to create an NFT is to go, well, first of all, before you jump into kind of creation of NFT, understand that there are certain things that you need to have in place. Just like when you create a piece of art, you don't say, for example, well, I'll bring the canvas and start painting. You probably have to set the place up. You need to choose which canvas works best. You need to research some brushes, what colors you want to use, because every color, if you want to paint oil or watercolor, that changes the canvas you want to work with. You changes the airbrush or the brushes that you want to use. So it really depends on what's the outcome you want. So if your NFTs are usually created on a blockchain, it's a technology product. So it requires that a title, you want to title the NFT, you want to decide how many of that NFT do you want to create. You usually can create 1 out of 1. Think of an NFT like a print. So you can create 1 out of 1, or you can create 20 out of 20, or 50 or 100. That will impact its value, and it will impact how many people can own it. You can attach certain privileges to the NFT. So the NFT itself is the digital file that you're creating, kind of like the certificate of authenticity. You can attach to it the file itself in a low res so that it shows, but then say the person who owns the NFT, there you can unlock a 20 megabit file, or a 1 gigabit file that you can print on the whole wall, or attach with that NFT, you'll get a framed, or you'll get the actual painting. really you have to decide what is it that you're putting out. The NFT is just a medium. It's kind of like asking, how do I create a website? Well, what do you want to put on the website? What do you want to exhibit? What is the purpose of it? So if you're creating an NFT to sell your artwork, well, decide which artworks, what's the title, prepare all of that. In addition to that, an NFT, because it's created on a blockchain, the currency that is used on a blockchain is usually a cryptocurrency. So you need to you need to have a cryptocurrency wallet. And for that, it's a long kind of conversation, but you need to learn which wallets work, how to create them. It's kind of like understanding if you want to create a website again, if you want to have a payment process, you need to understand what that payment process. Are you accepting PayPal? Are you accepting credit cards? What are the implications of doing that? So it's similar. It's not the same. It's similar in that you have to understand these things. You're now entering into the technology sphere. So while you are an artist, you need to understand a little bit more about the technology and its implications. So my recommendation is understand what crypto wallets are, understand the different kinds of marketplaces, understand what the implication of NFTs. Once you understand that, then create your crypto wallet on the favorite one for you, fill it up with some cryptocurrency, then prepare your files, go to any of the marketplaces. The two biggest ones are Rarible and OpenSea. They will be the biggest ones. These are like open marketplaces, as if you have your booth in a marketplace. So that's what it is. You create your profile there and you add your artwork and you create the NFT. If you have all these things ready, it shouldn't take you more than 5 to 10 minutes to create an NFT. You can also reach out. Another way of doing that is to reach out to a gallery-like NFT marketplace. These would be like Super Rare, or will be like Nifty Gateway. These are more like galleries. You go to them and say, I want to exhibit with you, and you have an application. And then when they accept you, they kind of walk you through the process, and they kind of create the NFTs and share them with everyone. Each one of those have their downsides and upsides, whether you want to have more control or whether you want somebody to help you. And in the near future, we will have Momentable, which we are taking on certain select artists. So we kind of trying to work with artists that are already existing and take them on. If there are any other questions aside from this, happy to share that with you. Also, if you go to my LinkedIn or you follow me in any way, I will be sharing. There's a guide for NFTs that will help you understand the background, and we will be creating a guide to walk you through that. The challenge with NFTs is what worked yesterday might not work today. These platforms are changing and evolving on a regular basis, and there will be changes. For example, NFT used to cost a lot of money to mint several months ago. Now platforms are offering NFTs to mint for free on certain blockchains. So things do change. You need to keep up, and there are starting points that will make it easy. Ping me, I'll be happy to send you some stuff. There is actually a free guide for NFTs if you go to nft.nextdecentrum.com.
Yeah, I was going to recommend that resource as well. I think it's got some a great collection of material there. But I would also add to that the entire NFT space, the blockchain space, is kind of riddled with complexity. The terminology, the user experience, all of that stuff is still being developed, and you can feel it once you start jumping on these platforms, is that those things are still being worked out. And that's another side of the technology that we're interested in exploring, is how do we make that experience seamless, where you just like upload something and you get that certificate of authenticity just accrues to your profile in some way without you needing to really know all the ins and outs of what happens behind the scenes. But I think that's still evolving.
Great. Well, it's connection. There was someone asked a question while you were talking, Hussein, asking about what platforms are reliable for artists. And in their question, they asked, like Super Rare, OpenSea. Are there certain platforms you recommend, or is there, they're asking, is there an open DIY platform we should be looking at or waiting for? Maybe if you could even include that link you mentioned in the chat for everybody for the resources for that.
Sure, I will do that. I will certainly do that. So OpenSea, Rarible are the open markets. You're on your own. They are basically open markets. You can test around, and I would say test with some NFTs that are like playful. There's basically when you create an NFT, just like when you create a website, nothing can go wrong unless it's the NFT that you want to release. So never release. Just like you never make your website public until you're ready, never release your NFTs and tell people about it before you're ready for doing that. So I would recommend go play around. Consider it like a play, just like I would like to reference to art is that, I mean, bring a canvas and just paint. Don't prepare directly to an exhibition. Don't contact the gallery and announce the exhibition before you start, first painting and experimenting. So I would say go experiment. Start with OpenSea to experiment. OpenSea, I think, is an easier experience than Rarible. Rarible only connects to your crypto wallet. OpenSea, you can have an account and connect your crypto wallet. So it's a little bit easier than that. A lot of people struggle with the crypto wallet concept and connecting that. So start with OpenSea, I would recommend as a starting point to play around. If you are a well-known artist and you want to enter either digital or non-digital, want to enter the digital space, you may want to contact Nifty Gateway or Rarible. I cannot recommend them because each one of them will have its own challenges based on what you want to achieve. And I don't even recommend ours as a like the only place. There is no only place. It really depends what you want. It's kind of like saying, you know what, oil, painting with oil colors and on this kind of canvas, I recommend. Like that doesn't make any sense. It depends what kind of artist you are, what are your goals. So it really depends on you and starting with your goals and your experiences. And I would say for start, talk to all of them. Just like if you want to exhibit, you don't just go to one gallery, you go see the space, check it out, see, will your paintings, hang well? As you can tell, we ran a lot of, when I launched our platform 2006, I worked with a lot of artists and we worked on it, and it's a complex process, right? So where you hang it, where you want it, how the light's going to be, you care a lot about your art. You spent a lot of energy on it. This is not the step where you want to take it easy and say, you know what, like just anywhere. No, you want to take some time to understand it. You want to, and highly recommend you do so. There's no downside for spending time learning about this new technology that is dominating the space. And just like the internet will change, and you could have been there in 1998, or you could have joined in 2008. The difference is 10 years of being first and benefiting, but also you had to have spend time on learning, but you'll be ahead of people who came later and had to build up when people are ahead of them. In the same way, now NFTs have the opportunity to you have the opportunity to be first and to be one of the early ones to benefit from it, or you can wait a few years until it becomes easier. But the opportunity a lot of the opportunity may have passed. Right now, I would guess the higher risk, but also immensely high rewards.
And I'll just add to that. It is. I think it's a bit overwhelming to a lot of artists, given just how much stuff there is in the space right now. But there are decent primers, and there's more and more of them to find that will kind of walk you through the basics and kind of give you the terminology in the background. So like the one on Nexus Decentrum, or I think like OpenSea has a kind of FAQ site that kind of explains the basics, and a lot of these, if you just look around a bit, you'll find some of the background information to kind of ease the process a bit and make it a little easier, because it is a bit overwhelming, just the volume of stuff right now.
Great, thank you. There's one last question, and again, if there's any other questions out there, please throw them up in the chat. There was an emblematic case a few months ago regarding the creation of an NFT for the Disaster Girl, famous internet meme. What are the possible outcomes of the widespread use of NFTs to ensure the property of GIFs, emojis, or memes? Whether decentralizing value for artworks might also open the door for possible privatization of the use of internet images? And wondering if in the future, the digital content will cease from being open and will be subdued as another sort of commodity, which, as we know, the art world tends to commodify. Any response to
Yeah.
that?
I think once something's on the internet, is on the internet forever. Whether it's going to be taken, I mean, like, was it the Charlie Bit My Finger was taken off the YouTube? I think, I don't know. And when they minted it as an NFT, I think that's a trend that will continue. The principle here is about openness and going forward. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But I think my personal opinion, then I'll hand it over to the team, is that it's going to be more open. And if anything, people who created some of the most iconic stuff on the internet and made it available for everyone have an opportunity to monetize and to benefit from it while keeping it out there. The whole point of it is to keep it out there while you monetize. And that's, I think, the trend is going to go. But yeah, there will be those cases where things don't go as we like them. As technology is not perfect. When the internet came, we thought it's going to change the world and it's going to open everything up. And as much as we have the ingenuity of opening things up and innovation, there's ingenuity in the other directions. Like, hey, how can we make the most money out of this, and how can we own the most out of this? So I think it's always going to be these opposing forces, and maybe someday, maybe with you use a blockchain, and that's the beauty about blockchain as a technology, is that the more you seek self-interest, the more you open it up to others, and the more you benefit everybody else. Which is, if the ability of that is able to translate well and continue to, I think there's very, very good hope and to what is possible with this technology and with in a new blockchain world. I pass it back to Blaine and Mo.
Yeah, I think I give my 2 cents about that too. Is that when I look at the blockchain space, it does remind me, and I'm old enough to remember the beginnings of the internet back in the early 90s, and like how that was a moment of possibility and like pockets of almost like subcultures, which seems to have been eroded over time, where you have this giant, like the tech giants kind of taking over our experience of the internet. And it wasn't always that way. And I see the blockchain space as a challenge to that, one vision of the internet. They call it, Web 3.0 now with decentralization. And so the question about ownership, privatization, I think it's a super valid question, but it's also an opportunity in the blockchain space to have pockets of existence, almost like pockets of interest in different chains. Like there isn't just one blockchain, there's many companies working on different chains, and each one has their characteristics. So that's, there may well be a chain or, that's catered towards people who are interested in a certain philosophy of ownership or lack thereof. And there may be another one that's not so much. I see potential there, and I think it's a question that needs to be asked very early on, and just like you're doing now. And that as technology companies develop it, that voice gets heard and gets baked into the technologies that are being built. So that's what we want to be doing, is we want to be challenging those concepts.
And it is still really fundamentally pretty early days in terms of where these things are going. And I think particularly with blockchain as an underlying mechanism, more and more people are kind of finding ways to use it in new directions and facilitating other sort of structures and organizations. So the question of ownership and monetization and open access, those are questions that need to be asked and continually discussed as the technology develops, because people are just it's just really starting to percolate into the wider community in terms of what these things mean, because it really has, it sort of had its impetus in the tech side of the tech sector, but it is really percolating out much further. So it's one of those things that we really have to be aware of and kind of question as it goes, and it will go in new directions very quickly. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we've come to our time as well, and I think we've come to the end of the questions. I think that was a really good introduction of a really huge topic. So thank you all three very much for breaking it down. I'm sure we'll have, further conversations. I'm hoping some of the people that were watching today will send you some of their questions to help further your research as well, because I do think it's really important that artists get in, when it's just starting out and start that experimentation and exploring. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Well, thank you to everybody out there who was watching us today, to my colleague Melanie, who was helping behind the scenes. If you do want to rewatch this, we have recorded it. It should be available on the Richmond Art Gallery's website in a few weeks. Otherwise, hopefully you can join us again next month, September 25th. We have another panel of 3 artists who've actually been working with youth on a year-long project called Signs of Pride. It was a public art project in Richmond. Right now, we're unsure whether we will be in person or online, so check back with us and we'll let you know what platform we'll be on then. Meanwhile, everyone, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and we hope to see you again soon. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.